Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Podcasting for Business, live from beautiful but a little windy Los Angeles, California. Rons, how are we doing in Brisbane, Australia?
It's a bit wet. It has been wet for a few days, and it's a bit different because Brisbane's always blue skies, right? So this is Brisbane struggling a little bit for sure.
Well, if this is your first time joining us on Podcasting for Business, we're going to do everything we can to give your business and podcast an upgrade. This is not for hobby podcasters. This is for serious business owners who are serious about results. We're going to go through useful chatter, which is basically things that are making news in the world of podcasting and business. We're going to go through today's tactic, which is a simple tactic to upgrade your podcast and grow your business. The tactic that we're going to go through today is called the Attention Mountain framework. This is to make sure you build your credibility in your industry from the mountain of value that you already have. Then we're going to go through a special guest for today. Now, our special guest is already here. It's actually Ronsley. We're going to dive a little bit into what first got him into podcasting, some of the trends that he's seeing right now, and how he was able to use podcasting to grow his business. And then we're going to go through the big mistake for today, which is something that is just, it's having podcasted for years myself, and I'm sure Ronsley can vouch for this as well. It's very easy to see how people fall in the situation of having this mistake, but it's also a very important thing that we need to fix. And the mistake is releasing episodes inconsistently. So we're going to diagnose that problem if that's you, and we're going to give you some actions to help you alleviate that and get your podcast consistent and your whole content machine firing on all cylinders. Rons.
I'm guilty. I was just gonna say I was putting my hand up and say I was guilty for like inconsistently releasing podcast after doing it for like 8 or 9 years. Like, there's definitely patches where you go through and you're like, I don't know how to release right now because there's so many spinning plates. However, it can be avoided, and there are lots of times that it could have been avoided. So it's great to like talk about that. But even to do this show, for example, James, like this is our third show. We're trying something new. It's going live to YouTube. It's going live to LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, all at the same time. We've done a lot of like live conversations in audio with Clubhouse over the last year. So, but this is different. This is new. And then, like, we're trying to figure this out. Like, the tech has failed on us a few times, and it's quite easy to get demotivated because it didn't go perfectly according to plan. But like, I'm glad we get a chance to have these conversations, go deeper into some of the news that's happening, and actually get people involved in the show. So if you're watching, whether it's live or a replay of this, because it's obviously going to be on all the channels, let us know you're here. Let us know where you're from, and we'd be keen to like get to know the audience a little bit, because then we can actually improve the show. So without going too much off script, because James likes that a lot, not James, I'm handing it back to you.
Let's do it. Let's go on to useful chatter now. Things that are making news in the world of podcasting and business. Ronsley, what are you seeing out there that's caught your eye in news today?
Well, I was really surprised. So we get our news. I mean, we've been a big supporter of Pod News, and they have of we are podcasts for years now, and we get our news from Pod News. And recently, well, the most recent newsletter came with something that caught my eye, because Daniel J. Lewis is someone that has been in the podcasting game for ages, like over a decade easily, and has probably created a lot of podcasts out there. And he was part of the Podcast Academy as one of the governors. And he put out a tweet that was kind of offensive and sort of non-inclusive. And it caught my eye because it's someone that, from my point of view, he is just saying what he believes in. That's really it, right? But then now him saying what he believes in is now having him, which has not changed really over the years, right? It's not like Daniel woke up one day and he was not a religious Christian person. He was always like that, and he created a lot of his shows around that topic. So him having certain views. So I'm keen because I haven't met Daniel, but I've interviewed him and we've spoken, and I've consumed a lot of his stuff initially before I even started podcasting. So I'm keen to hear what you thought, because you did follow the same news line, didn't you?
I did. So shout out James Cridlin and Pod News, amazing publication. I read Pod News every single morning in my backyard with a delicious Australian style latte. And I actually, I'm not particularly familiar with Daniel J. Lewis. In fact, I initially thought it was about Daniel Day-Lewis, the famous Academy Award winning actor. I think the problem with a lot of the world that we're in, which is really only amplified by a lot of these social media platforms like Twitter, is that people are very quick to condemnation. And I would feel much more comfortable being quicker to conversation. So asking questions to understand someone's viewpoint, trying to bring people together to understand different perspectives so both of us can grow. I think what Daniel had said, based on the things that I saw, I mean, it certainly shows an enormous amount of naivete and ignorance as well, and clearly shouldn't have been said.
Yeah.
And he should apologize if he hadn't apologized already. But I hope that he is ready to initiate a conversation in terms of what he can do to grow and understand the perspectives of more and more people. And I also think we need to do a better job of helping try to understand where people are coming from. There's a quote that I always think about. It says, "Seek first to understand, then be understood." It comes from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's only when you can properly understand someone and what they're doing, that's when you can help move the conversation forward. But if it's outrage, then it's like that whole shaking hands with a closed fist. There's nothing that you can really do to fix that. So I don't
Mm.
know. I'm a big believer that we can learn from everyone and every situation, good or bad. And quick to conversation rather than condemnation would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I find that, but I think James Cridlin from Pod News did an amazing job by asking Daniel for a comment, and it was really interesting because even in the news he made it a point to publish the fact that he did that. Like, he could have easily left that out, but he said that he did that and decided that he didn't want to publish his response. And I found that even more interesting because I was like, I wonder what he said is my sort of, because then now we're just assuming like what has gone down, right? Uh, but
Mm.
but my the reason I wanted to bring it up is not necessarily because of the people involved necessarily, but also because of what has been happening with the cancel culture, and it's quite um, uh, it's quite insane. But I suppose with influencer culture comes cancel culture. I wonder what your thoughts on that is.
Yeah, my problem with cancel culture is there is now an enormous amount of people, I would say probably 98% of people in the world now who feel like they're not comfortable sharing their views. So as someone who's done a lot of work and, my life's work is really about human potential and how people can unlock that. And by letting people know that their feelings are invalid or trying to benchmark your pain against someone else, I believe is a fool's errand, and that we have no context of what people have really gone through. And I mean, there are people out there every single day, every single minute who are saying inexcusable things, and hopefully we can better educate those people in terms of what they can do, because we all need to grow and get better. But when we're busy canceling, it means no one feels like their feelings are valid. An example of that, Ron, is, remember when you organized that session for us to interview the people at a death row prison in America? And I was like, dude, like Ron's had organized this for our clients. And I was like, my first thought had gone to the families of the victims and all of those different things. And it was a real perspective shifter for me, and something that I will never forget, in terms of denying people a right to provide some context and perspective so we can learn and make the world a better place, by judging people who, on the worst thing they've ever done, who they might have been 20 years old when they did it, completely destroyed on drugs and alcohol and all these different things after 20 years of the most horrific abuse that they have endured. I mean, there's so many layers that you go behind the scenes of all these different things. But in my perspective, the people who are so quickly to burn the books and want to stop other people from having a voice. They're the people I just don't really have anything in common with from a values perspective, because all the people that I hang around and all the growth that I have experienced and helped facilitate for the people that I've worked with is all through vulnerability and understanding different perspectives so we can grow together.
Yeah, I think it's a bit weird and funny in the dichotomy that you want inclusion and you're excluding someone to get that inclusion is a bit of a weird way to go about getting. Especially, it's like there's a great quote. I first heard it. Wayne Dyer in one of his tapes. He's like, fighting for peace is like fucking for virginity or something like that. And it's almost like it's almost like that right now, right? It's like
Yeah.
I want to be included, but I want to exclude this person and feel included while that's happening. So fascinating times.
It's It's crazy. Diluting people's perspectives and saying that they haven't been through this different stuff to completely disregard their own mental health struggles. I mean, there are too many people out there. My first book, The Beginner's Guide to Wealth, was written specifically to stop teenagers who might be in a relationship that to them is everything, but to other people is nothing. It's to stop people like that from taking their lives and letting them know that this too shall pass. There's a lot of other great things to do. And even people who have felt like they have done something wrong and might feel like they're ashamed of something that they might have put out there, rather than that being a life sentence for you, using that exact same amount of energy and redirecting it in a way to say, what can I do to be of service to really help more and more people? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that shame that I feel and put it towards a productive and proactive effort to show people through my actions since how willing I am to go and understand and be of service to help change people's lives. And I think if you can do that and come from a good heart, then really amazing things happen.
Well, amen, Pastor James. Uh,
And other news. A lot of people. There's so many different people who haven't spent too long in terms of the world of podcasting. They might be thinking like, is this a fad? Like, is podcasting here to stay? Revenue for podcasting, the report just came out. Just in the US alone, podcast and revenue growth hit $1.4 billion in the last year, just in the US alone in US dollars. And it's forecast to triple that within the next 3 years. I mean, that's huge. That's a massive amount of growth that is about to happen in the industry. And I remember reading an article, I think it was, or a video, I think it was from Ryan Holiday about 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And he was talking about why you shouldn't have a podcast. And I vehemently disagreed with his stance on that. Not trying to cancel him, but I vehemently disagree with his stance on that. Because through all the work runs that you and I do with our clients, if you manage your podcast and your business the right way, you will get a massive return on your investment of running your podcast before anyone even hears a single episode, before it's even released, if you have the right plan. And people might be like, you might be thinking, what does that look like? Well, it's in terms of choosing your guests very intelligently and strategically. It's doing an enormous amount of preparation, so you're very aware of gaining insight into those fields of expertise that you may not have been overly comfortable with before. It's establishing rapport with a whole bunch of new people who might be able to introduce you to more and more people. It's a massive amount of social media content that you can create from that. It's a leverageable asset that you can use for books and events and all these other different things that you can create. The ROI that you get on your podcast before it's even released is absolutely enormous. So if you're thinking about dipping your toe into podcasting and thinking, look, maybe this industry is overdone, maybe podcasting is not here to stay, now is the time to get in. Now is the time that you can use your podcast as a single leverageable master asset to be able to get more clients and scale your business better than you ever thought.
and I think it's really a good point because podcasting has been siloed in a lot of aspects because there has been podcasters sort of kind of talk to podcasters and it's not necessarily the people either know about podcasting or don't know about podcasting, um, but what also tends to happen is that they get their information from one particular kind of source, right? And when that happens, they our perspective is only as limited as, I suppose, um, the experience we have. So if for example we only consume a certain amount of stuff or certain things, then our imagination of what we think is possible is sort of limited to that experience. And that goes to our comments. Like if we're commenting on things without hearing the whole all the sides of things, that's what we're talking about in our first news segment. um, like that's the problem, is that you're not hearing all sides and you're just kind of commenting without being inclusive. And I think that's part of here, when you're thinking about your business and you think about what can you do in your business that can be like marketing return. Nothing better than a podcast right now, because you get all your content done, but you also create this great business development tool that is second to none. And I think that's the power of podcasting that we're trying to communicate.
Yeah, it's huge. And what else are you doing? If you're not using a podcast, what are you doing to garner attention for your business? The answer is probably nothing. Like, what are you doing to gain access to the most successful people in the entire world, to become friends with them? What are you doing to upgrade your mind and get an education for the real world, in terms of being able to sit down with the smartest, most successful, most influential people on the planet and ask them any question you want without having to pay a cent? What are you doing to become friends with these people? If you don't have a podcast, I just don't know what the answer is. And I've explored this in a large amount of depth. I've even done speaking engagements talking about the benefits of having a podcast. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, the time is right. And our Podcasting for Business show shows you exactly what you can do to grow your business using your podcast. And Rons, I'd love to get into today's tactic, the Attention Mountain framework. I think there'll be some people out there who are pretty keen to hear that.
Yeah. So just to be clear, like if you have a business and you have a podcast, like this show is to show you how to grow. And if you've been thinking about having a podcast and that's been on your mind, then hopefully listening to some of the stories on the show and how a lot of the people here have used their podcast to gain access to like new audience, to get clients, to get opportunities, and to get people sort of coming to them and being the attractor in the whole thing, then this is what we're trying to sort of create here. So as a business owner, what can you do to make that possible? And today's tactic sort of really is from that. And I think probably Gary Vaynerchuk is the person that first started talking about how important attention is. And I think he has a really good quote, if I'm correct to quote him rightly, is attention is the main currency right now. And it's all about attention. Like you can create the best lead magnet on the planet, or you can create the best PDF, or you can create the best program, or you can create the best business, or you can create the best podcast. But if you have no attention to that, or you can write the best book on the planet, but if you have no attention going into that, then it's kind of valuable. It's kind of sitting either in the garage, or no one's reading it, unfortunately, despite all the effort put into it. So today, the tactic is all about getting credibility from our experience. Like, how do we get attention and credibility from our current experience? So there are four things that you can base it on. And the reason it is built up like a triangle is because you first start with the experience, then you go to clients, then you go to results, and then you talk about value, and then you get to value actually. So when you're talking about creating attention in your industry, you first base it on your experience. And that is like the experience. What I'm talking about is what kind of reps have you done? Like, what have you done already? And that is the best way to start with experience. For example, if you are a running coach, rather than say, I have, or you think that the only way to display credibility is to say, I've won the New York Marathon, rather than that, you can say, I have run 1,000 miles a year for the last 5 years. So those are the reps that you have put in, and it's not easy to run 1,000 miles a year for 5 years. So if you're a runner, you know that is quite a bit of work. So he or she obviously as a coach knows how to sustain running. And so that's what I mean. So what are the reps you've done? And I'm giving you examples here because these are mine. So I talk about this a lot. Like I've helped over 1,000 clients launch podcasts for their businesses and keep the podcast, make the podcast useful to grow their business and their brand. And more importantly, I've done over 1,400 interviews over the last 7-8 years. So I have put in the reps is what I'm trying to get at. So what are the reps? So you start with that. The next thing you go to is the clients. So regulars, who have you helped? So this is a great quote, but it's something that stuck with me. Your success can be measured by the success of your clients. So who have you helped? Like what have they achieved? And you look at their success as your success. So after you start talking about the reps you've done, then you start talking about who you've helped. So in my instance, is like I've helped some seriously famous actors, politicians, entrepreneurs, athletes, some amazing corporate people who came out for the first time and became entrepreneurs, create a business and a podcast, and like have an amazing life. So who are my regulars? These are the stories that I'd like to tell. So first I talk about the reps I've done, then I talk about who I help. Then I go to talking about results, which are these rewards. And unfortunately, we make the mistake of talking about rewards first. We make the mistake of talking about what we've achieved first rather than third. And that's when we come across as, oh, this person is like either too pushy or too salesy or too like show off is probably not an English word, but it is the word I'm using right now. So
It is now.
yeah, it is now. So what are the rewards? Like what after doing all the reps, what have you achieved? And like for example, me, the TED Talk, Entrepreneur of the Year in Brisbane, finalist Entrepreneur of the Year, not actually Entrepreneur of the Year. 1 million listeners in 6 months, $1 million company in 9 months. So like no one really cares about these things that I'm talking about right now if they don't kind of see that I've put in the reps. Like most people don't want to hear about my credibility if I'm just some person that has just shot to fame for no, like without putting in the reps. And you think about that everyone likes an underdog story is because they can see the reps being put in. And then finally is reputation. What have you delivered? This is what others say about you when you're not in the room. And that includes leads, opportunities, and clients. When someone asks about you, what kind of reputation is already out there and what are people saying that about you when you're not in the room? So that's the attention mountain. I'm keen to hear from you, James. Like, what do you think? I don't know what made sense, I suppose, in what I just sort of explained.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's fantastic. Some of the stuff that you went through there reminded me of the Warren Buffett quote. The famous investor Warren Buffett, I think he's in his late 80s now. He was talking about the definition of success. I have it saved on my phone. I thought I'd read that out right now. Warren Buffett said, when you get to my age, you'll really measure your success in life by how many of the people you want to have, that you want to have love you, actually do love you. And I thought that was such a good thing. Like the ultimate test of how you've lived your life is how many of the people you want to have love you actually do love you. And I thought that was interesting. I think another thing, Ron's, for people especially who are just starting out in their businesses or maybe feel like they're treading water or don't have as many of the runs on the board that you do from a credibility perspective, you must have things out there in terms of problems that you've solved. Get some case studies from people. There's people in your network who are desperate to help you. Do what you can do to get out there and let people know my mission for the year is to achieve XYZ. To do that, I'm looking for case studies of people who've been really happy with the transformation that I've been able to provide. I've put together a few of these questions or bullet points here. If you could send through a video that goes through your experience from where you were at initially, and then some of the things that we were able to work on and how you're feeling now, that'd be really helpful. And of course, follow up with them a week later if you haven't got that. These people out there are desperate to help you. And if you do that, you'll have an enormous bank of testimonials and other things like that in terms of people that you've been able to help. So that credibility stack is really, really important. Think about the value that you've been able to provide for people and tap into that network. Again, these people want to help you, but if you haven't asked them, then they're not going to be able to help you.
Yeah. I think that just tuning into the show and sort of understanding some of these concepts is what we're trying to provide. Is like there's not really many people out there thinking about the business owner that has invested all this time and effort into creating a podcast for their business and trying to grow it, and you get clients and have all these spinning plates, right? So most people when they're starting a podcast in the world of podcasts, have spare time and are just kind of doing it to create a show. Here, there are specific people that we're trying to focus on. Are you the business owner that has started this podcast to get more attention and get more sales and get placed as the influencer, I suppose, in your industry, where you start influencing not only people but sort of the decision making within the industry?
Yeah, people who aren't doing a very good job at capturing the right attention, they are the ones who are always trying to find these opportunities. But when you're recognized as an authority in your field, opportunities come their way to you, and all you need to do is say a yes or no based on those different opportunities. I mean, if someone's struggling with a certain problem and you have a friend out there who you know is the best, or who you believe, most importantly, is the best, you're going to be desperate to connect the dots with those two people to make sure the person who has this problem is able to get the solution with someone you know who has the trusted name, especially if it means that they might go and see someone who might make the problem worse. So having something like a podcast as a single master asset means that you build up an enormous amount of trust with these people. So as a business owner or as a professional, when you're having a strategy call or an initial consultation or a sales call or whatever you call it in your business, you can spend more time calibrating the problem the person has and what success looks like to them, rather than selling them on your merits and why you're the right person for the job.
Yeah.
If you do all the things that we've spoken about here properly, they're going to automatically assume that you're the right person for the job, and you've already got that trust built in, so you can focus on the calibration rather than selling who you are and your services. If you have to do that, you've already lost.
Yeah, it's a good time to go into the mistake, because that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, so we want to kind of cover these mistakes because we feel like these are like things that we've been seeing our clients go through when they come to us, and they go through after they start fixing these little problems, they make these big differences. So these are just mistakes that business owners make when they start their podcast, because let's be honest, business owners are not podcasters, right? They're not. We are business owners that are using the podcast and learning to be a podcaster, learning to be an interviewer, learning to use the podcast to market. So these are like little things that when you're aware of these mistakes, there are little fixes that you can make to sort of rectify them. So we're going to cover them on this show. We've got a list of them. And if you want access to that, comment below, because we can just give you the whole list if that tickles your fancy, I suppose. So let's get into today's mistake, James.
Sounds great. We'll give you the whole list as well as actionable steps on how to fix them. So the mistake today is mistake 8 from this list of 70 mistakes that we have compiled from working with thousands of business owners all over the world. And mistake 8 is releasing episodes inconsistently. Now, do you remember a little while back when Game of Thrones just took over the world? It was like you'd watch the episode on the Sunday night or wherever it was in your time region, and then there'd be articles. Everyone would be reading the recaps and they'd be talking about it. There'd be predictions and all these things. And then everyone would be sitting there again on Sunday night with the takeaway food and their friends, and it would be this event that everyone would look forward to. But you cannot, or you don't need to go and create the next Game of Thrones, but you'll never be able to build a loyal fan base if you are ghosting people on a regular basis. That's why consistency is so important. Everyone's out there looking for the next big tactic, but focusing on consistency first. Don't try and overcommit to being like, yes, I'm going to have a podcast come out every week or every few days if you haven't even been consistent with having it every 2 weeks. So making sure you're consistent with your frequency first of all, because that way the audience knows when to expect you, and then you can be a staple in their life. Rons?
Yeah, I think the frequency, we kind of use other examples to illustrate what um, leads to inconsistency, I suppose. Because when you think about things that you do for the first time, like, and in podcasting, you're probably doing it for the first time, and a lot of things that you're learning. Like for us, we're doing this show for the first time. We're learning to do this live thing. I constantly get nervous for this show. James looks all cute, cool as a cucumber, has got ice everywhere, and I am here like panicking, going, "Oh, I hope I get this right." So it's really interesting, right? This whole dynamic of doing something for the first time, trying to look good while you're doing it, because you want to be seen as the expert. So that is what we're trying to avoid here, is when you get to that point and you start releasing inconsistently. And to avoid that, you don't have to do it like other people have done it. And that's the point I want to make here, is like, don't look at like a John Lee Dumas who's done it for 7 days every day for like years. Look at the reps he's done, right? He's put in the reps. You can see everyone knows he's put in the reps. So now he's taken a whole massive back step and just chilling, and doing it very entirely differently from what he's done in the initial years. And that's the thing. Like, people are seeing someone's year 15 and not realizing their year one. And that's the reason of the attention mountain that we spoke about earlier being based on experience first. So building that experience, making sure that those reps are important. And that is the episodes you release are your reps. So right now, I've done over 1,400 interviews. If you Google my name, for example, or you Google James's name, uh, there's like pages of stuff that comes up. It's crazy. I find that extremely weird, but it is.
SEO for podcasting is legit, isn't it? Because of all the different, providers that it goes out to. The only other thing, if you type in my name, the first American to climb Mount Everest, I think it was about 70 years ago, something like that, was another guy called James Whitaker. So it's me and him if you go and Google us. Ron's one of the biggest, and you mentioned reps there. I mean, reps is so important. People might be thinking, how do I get to that? How do I even get to my year 15? You start today with what you have and you put the reps in. An example of why this feels comfortable now is because when COVID hit and Clubhouse became a thing, we were running at least one Clubhouse session a week, sometimes 2 or 3. That means you get dozens and dozens of people every single session, every single hour. Some of these things went for hours and hours at a time. And they would ask you any question on podcasting and business. I've been featured on more than 600 radio, TV, and podcast shows. There's just not a question now. The only one question that's really stumped me, I think, was, what's a question you've never been asked? And I was like, dude, that's not even a good question. So, yeah, I feel like putting your reps in with what you have now is a big part of that. So some of the traps that people fall into in terms of being inconsistent with their release, one of the biggest ones is that perfectionist mentality. And I really, really, really understand what that's like. I really do. But the name of the game is speed and quality. If you can figure out how to make your show a little bit better quality and a little bit faster every single time, rather than overthinking these episodes, and that's going to be a huge win. Another thing that you can do is reduce the length of your episodes. If your episodes are, 45 minutes or an hour or longer. I remember the very first interview episode that I did, the second interview episode I did for my show was like an hour and a half. So to go and play back that episode, to go and tell the videographer what to add in, and to play it back with the audio things for all this different stuff. Like, all these things take time. So now I try and dial that right back to that sweet spot of about 40 or 45 minutes, which works really well for me. So if you're producing episodes that are too long, is completely up to you, whatever that looks like for you. Just dial it back. Again, consistency is the name of the game here. Don't try and make the perfect episode. Don't try and make it a 3-hour Joe Rogan experience. Stop trying to produce episodes in silos. If you can batch produce episodes, then, I've got 2 episodes this week in the studio, which are going to be great. It's so good to be able to do that and have these episodes in the bank ready to go is huge. And then something that Ronsley's really, really good at is having like a streamlined process to go from, basically the concept of what that episode looks like to get it recorded, published, and evaluating the metrics. If you have a streamlined process to being able to do that, not only will it get everything out a lot faster, it means that you don't have to worry about what I've forgotten, because you've got a checklist of all those different things that, like a Tesla factory, is getting better by the minute. So that's important.
No, and again, I think we're going to cover that in episode 5 or 6, where I break down the different stages. Because then once you know the stages, then so for us, this is recording stage, right? Our publishing stage is we take this entire session and it gets broken down into a podcast version. So if you want the edited version of this without our waffling, I suppose, and all the rubbish in between, and you don't want to hear the live show, then catch Should I Start a Podcast on any of the podcasting channels on Spotify. Listen.shouldistartapodcast.com. You can find all our catalog there. But there's different ways that we have come up with that sort of allows us to not release inconsistently. So one of the things that podcasters do is when they record, they're recording in a silo. This is as to what picking up what James is talking about, like, and it's only between the recording happens between the guest and yourself, and no one sort of hears about it unless you do a live video before or something like that to talk about the fact that you're recording. But now we decided, because the Clubhouse, that we can get people to do this live. We can actually live. So we have guests that come on this show live, and we record that. Our guest today unfortunately canceled last minute, so we have those issues as well as budding live streamers to deal with. But it's an interesting thing. So we're learning to be consistent despite having what we might consider a setback or not perfect sort of scenario.
Yeah, turning up and just doing those reps is enormous. Over time, like a compound interest graph, it's insane, the results and the awareness that creates. There's one thing to really take away from the big mistake here. It's to stop worrying about things like, should I upgrade my webcam? Should I upgrade my microphone? Should I upgrade my lighting, my desk, all of these different things? Wait until you're consistent. Make that the challenge so you can have something as a reward at the end of that. Once you have got your show consistent, that's when you can do all these other things. I only started releasing my show weekly after I had it really dialed in to be released every 2 weeks. So it was years I had my show fortnightly, and I actually even had a break for it. And now I have it come out every single week. I built that over time because I learned the lessons of my inconsistency when I initially launched my podcast to begin with. So focus on that consistency, and then there are many ways that you can improve and upgrade your entire setup for eternity.
Yeah, and again, don't get us wrong. We've been in this trap, and I said this at the start of the show. Is like we've all gotten into spaces where we just don't feel motivated to record or to publish, or it just doesn't become a thing. But if you think about the shows that take themselves seriously, they don't have a break in their schedule. Like, they don't. It's extreme. I find it extremely crazy that how Trevor Noah shows up week in and week out. But you think about the fact that they take breaks as well. Like, they don't record for 52 weeks of the year, right? They have their breaks, and they have the way that they structure their show. And this brings me back, and we might end the show on this sort of note, maybe. But tune in for the next one, which is in a couple of days. So we do this every Wednesday and Friday. And what I love, if you're listening, watching, is that let us know what part you came into, and what part you're watching, and what part impacted you, or what part made sense to you, because we really require some sort of like feedback from the audience to sort of craft this show more and more. And it might not happen today, it might not happen on our next show, but over time, that's what we're trying to achieve. So with the frequency, it's okay if you're in that spot, and it's fine to be in that spot, but you just got to know that you can recreate the magic and there's easy ways to do that, and you can get ahead, and you can be consistent, and you can do the reps that don't feel great. Every marathoner, for example, will remember all the times that they went for the run when it didn't feel great. And that's what we're
Mm.
trying to do here, is with our reps, including this. It doesn't necessarily feel great, it doesn't feel perfect yet, but with every time we do it, it sort of feels a little bit better than the last time. Hey, James.
Yeah, getting it done. Absolutely, absolutely. Podcasting, it's a journey. One other thing as we end here, just in terms of the benefits of being able to batch produce episodes, I have found the time that I have felt in most flow is when I'm stressed out of my eyeballs for a 2 week period where I've got a whole bunch of interviews. But it's so much easier to get the process of all those things nailed. You're doing them all in the one go, so it becomes like second nature. So that's easy to jump into. If you're just joining us, this is Podcasting for Business every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon if you're in the United States, every Wednesday and Friday if you're in Australia. Drop a comment to let us know what lands. Drop a comment to let us know a bit about your own business journey or a lesson from your own podcasting or business journey so we can feature that or feature you in our next episode. And also make sure you go and implement the Attention Mountain framework. Make sure that you start releasing your episodes consistently, not inconsistently, which was our big mistake that most people make with their podcasts from today. Ron's, anything else before we finish?
No, join us for the next show. And if you want to catch the replay, subscribe to the podcast. Should I start a podcast on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? We'll see you next time in a couple of days.
Sounds great.